Good evening. We want to welcome you this evening to a conversation as we together have had experiences over the last 2.5, almost 3 years now with the pandemic. And tonight, we want to share those experiences with each other through the lens of what's taking place in our communities, coming through the pandemic with our neighbors, our families, what is happening in our lives, what has it been for you, what have you experienced, what have you observed in the community. We want to welcome our guests from Fairfax City and Fairfax County. Steve Descano, thank you so much for being with us, Steve. And Mike Bartholme, thank you so much, Mike, for coming tonight. And of course, we have Bill Casey and Dave who are with us tonight, helping with our facilitation. The intent tonight is to have intimate conversations about what has happened with you personally, what has happened that you've observed in your community, in your job, and in society. And we hope that what comes from this tonight not only will inform us, but also will empower us. No one is an expert on the last 2.5 years. How do I know that? It's unprecedented. None of us has experienced what it means in our lifetime to have a pandemic that is not local, it is not national, it is global. What have we learned? What have we felt? What changes have we had in our personal lives? What changes have we observed, perhaps locally as well as globally? So tonight, we're looking at it through the lens of the law enforcement segment of our community. And why law enforcement? Because whenever there's a crisis, that 911 call becomes even more critical. First responders become more critical. And so we want to get to the heart of what we have lived with and what we're living through. I'd like to begin with a prayer, with our eyes open, aware of our presence in the seats, our presence in this room, the awareness of things in our lives. I want us to think deeply about what we have felt, whether it is a time of gratitude or concern. Let us be in an attitude of prayer. We thank you, O God, you are known by many names. You know us better than we know ourselves. You've put expectations on us because you have given to us our very breath of life. You have given us rules to live by. You have given us commandments to abide. You, O God, have put more faith in us than we sometimes put in you. But you never forsake us. You never leave us. You're constantly with and within us. Help us this night to be bold enough to share authentically, personally, publicly. Be with us this night to be aware of those who are near to us, whether in this room or beyond. Help us tonight, O God, to know that you have called us for a time such as this. Give to us the courage and the confidence to rely on you to be the people you have made us and called us to be. We offer ourselves in prayer. In the name of Jesus, our Christ. Amen. Well, I'd like to call Mike Bartholme to come at this time. Mike is with the Fairfax City Police Department, and we are thankful to you, Mike, for joining us tonight. And Mike will be followed by Steve Descano, who is the Fairfax County Commonwealth attorney. Mike?
Good evening, everyone. Is it okay if I take this off just to so I'm going to try to share some of our experiences, at least mine, from being a police officer, and just to kind of tell you what the last 2.5 years or so has been like. I guess we're a smaller department, right? Probably just about 2 miles down the road. And just a little background on me. I've been with the City of Fairfax Police Department just about 18 years now. So when the pandemic started in 2020, I was assigned to the Administrative Services Division. It's the division that oversees the dispatchers and records and that sort of thing, more of an administrative capacity. But one of the jobs of the Administrative Services Division is being the Infectious Disease Control Officer. So prior to the pandemic, it was a fairly, I wouldn't say easy, but it wasn't something we did a lot. If an officer got exposed to something like blood or a bite or something like that, I would be the person that would handle making sure that they were taken care of properly and given the correct medications and that kind of thing, so they didn't get a communicable disease. So all my predecessors that did the job before me had it probably a lot easier than I did. So this was definitely trailblazing when we got into 2020. When I thought about what I was going to say when I talked to you guys tonight, I made like a timeline, just kind of how it affected our department. So believe it or not, the date we got the first case of COVID-19, we were, as far as I know, only the second jurisdiction in the whole state of Virginia to get a COVID-19 case in the city of Fairfax. And it was only by a day or so. And I remember the date, it was on March the 4th, 2020. And of course, it was, there was immediate, immediate conference calls and strategizing, what do we do and that kind of thing. So immediately it kicked into gear. I mean, it went from 0 to 100 quickly, just to how do we deal with this day to day? How does the police department respond and what is next? So that started on March the 4th. On March the 7th, there was a press conference at the Sherwood Center, which is right next to our police station. And we began having the meetings weekly and sometimes a couple times a week, hey, what are the COVID numbers in the city of Fairfax and how do we deal with this and what protocols do we take? How do we keep officers safe and that kind of thing? Because we all know in a police officer's job, well, I mean, most of the folks that are like the operations folks, like the patrol officers, the dispatchers, animal control, the folks like that, they don't have the ability to telework. They got to be at work every day. So we had to really kind of hone in on how we were going to do things. So as it started, I guess the cases started coming a little more rapidly probably around April of 2020. And at that point in time, we made a decision. We split our police department in half. So we had like an A-side rotation that worked on a couple days a week, and the folks that could had to work from home. So that was a real challenge to, but the point of doing that was we wanted to still be operational just in case, everyone got COVID. Like, how do we, respond to calls? How do we help people and that kind of thing? So that was what we did in April. And that lasted until June, where it was just really challenging trying to have patrol officers and other folks that, really can't telework, still work from home and still function. So that was a huge challenge that we started in April of 2020. And June of 2020, we suspended it temporarily because some of the COVID numbers went down just a little bit then, and we sort of resumed normal operations. But that summer was very, it was very, I guess, odd. For any of you folks that come to the city of Fairfax for any of our events, we have a ton of really neat events like the Fall Festival and the July 4th. And I remember July 4th that year was a wave parade. I remember I participated with it. We had a bunch of floats and that kind of thing. And we drove a whole bunch of streets through the city of Fairfax just to hopefully bring people's spirits up, to lift their spirits and, say, hey, look, we're going to get through this. And we've really tried to. And it went over pretty well, but that was probably one of the first times that I can remember that the city of Fairfax didn't do like a July 4th thing. It was just a wave parade. That was something definitely for the books that year. As we progressed through the summer, we got into the fall time frame, and I remember it was right before the presidential election, and I was talking with our property and evidence officer and another captain, and we didn't know it at the time, but that gentleman had COVID-19. So a couple days later, a day or so later, he wound up testing positive, and a couple of us went and got tested for COVID-19. I had no symptoms at all whatsoever, so I was shocked when I heard that I had COVID-19 at the end of it was in, I guess, November of 2020. Now, the captain who was with me at the same time, He had completely different situation than I did. He was very sick and, nearly hospitalized and that sort of thing. The strange thing is, sometimes it hits people differently. I was fortunate, didn't have any real symptoms, and was able to recover fully. The captain, had a tougher time with it. Christmas was obviously a little bit different that year. The holidays was definitely different. And then we got into 2021, and that's when our police department started with, we were some of the first ones to get the vaccinations and that sort of thing. So that was, certainly good. We were just after the, the medical folks and that sort of thing. So us and the fire department and all, we went around the same time. And our emergency staffing was kind of through the holidays as well, and we ended the second round of that in about February of 2021. But a lot of things changed, but a lot of things, we learned from it greatly. So it was just really unique to see how we were able to adapt. I mean, we were doing, deconning our vehicles and our station, like we were using electrostatic sprayers. We were doing everything we could think of just to keep, people safe and well and healthy. We were doing the very best we could do to mitigate the spread, but just like probably most of society, many of our officers wound up testing positive over the next 2 years for COVID-19. Thankfully, everyone fully recovered and nobody had any long COVID. And I know that not everybody was as lucky as we were with that, but that was certainly a good thing that everybody was able to recover. The one thing that did help us in the long run is we are, some of our folks were able to telework, and that's become like a real blessing when possible, But I mean, you're never going to replace having a police officer on the street. We still need to be able to go and respond to calls for service, and and that's our job. So we understand the commitment we have to the community, to the city of Fairfax, and I think COVID really kind of brought us all closer together and made us, focused on our mission, as law enforcement officers in the area. And that's a basic overview of, kind of how COVID affected us the last 2 years or so. Any questions about just anything we dealt with? Oh, okay, yeah, sure. Well, thank you for your time.
Hello, everyone. I will tell you, I have been looking forward to this day for quite some time. I very much enjoy coming here and looking out at the crowd at a bunch of friends, old friends, new friends, and I've always felt welcome here. So I want to thank you very much for welcoming me again. I want to thank Art for putting this together, giving us the opportunity to talk. Because what we're talking about is, as Art said, it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Hopefully we never have to experience anything like this. But, when we think about COVID, it is something that affected us all, but it could have affected us in different ways and in the same way. I think that we all know how COVID affected our lives. It affected our health. It affected the connections that we have with other people, how we work, how we play. And I can tell you that, as the leader of our criminal justice system in the county, we always see what happens in our community. The cases that we get, the work that we do is a reflection of our community every day. And even though that we are the safest jurisdiction of our size anywhere in the country, we saw the reverberations from COVID, and I'll be very honest that we still see those reverberations today. Mike mentioned that the changes in how you did work, during the height of COVID. Your Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, we work with over a dozen different police departments, and they all dealt with COVID in their own way. So we had to respond and react to make sure that we had our law enforcement heroes. We were working with them as they tried to both keep themselves safe and continue to deliver public safety for our community. One of the other things that really, when I look back at COVID and what happened in our justice system, for long stretches of time, we didn't have trials because we did not have the space in the courthouse to bring jurors in because they couldn't sit next to each other. And even now, as we start to dig out of that, we are doing trials for crimes that were committed in 2018 and 2019. It really makes me think about how we grapple with the idea of how true is it that justice delayed may be justice denied. And as we consider not only the delay in justice, but as some victims or some witnesses leave the community or pass or what have you, there may be cases that because of COVID will reach a different resolution than they would have before. And I constantly think, and my team constantly thinks about what that means for victims and how they see their justice system after going through that. You know, I'll also note that, you know, one of the other challenges that we had, we talk about public safety all the time, that's our job, but COVID brought a new dimension to that. We have hundreds of men and women in jail at our detention center who were there pre-trial. And all of a sudden we had an environment that, because of close quarters, became a public health concern. I know that one of the things that my office did to do that is I personally went through every single case of every individual in there, looking for people that we could release safely into the community, so that to recognize the inherent human dignity of people in jail, even though they were accused of a crime. And I'm proud to say that we got our jail population down to as low as it's ever been. And the silver lining for that was it actually was able to work a reset for our justice system writ large about how we and how judges looked at dangerousness and whether people were dangerous and needed to be held while they were still legally innocent. And I'm happy to say that those lessons, one positive of COVID is those lessons still reverberate to this day, and our jail population remains lower than it's ever been, while at the same time crime in our community has gone down since 2019. And then the last thing that I will mention is, even though, again, we're the safest jurisdiction of our size anywhere in the country, and even though our murder rate is the lowest murder rate for any jurisdiction of 1 million people anywhere in the United States, and it continues to be that, we got to see how COVID changed the interactions that were coming into our office. We got to see, even in our small number of cases, that the homicides that we were seeing, a huge percent of them were family violence. They were strife. They were brothers and sisters, sons and mothers, sons and fathers. And I think that really speaks to the stress that COVID put on top of, in many ways, an already stressful life. About how it strained the community bonds that people really rely on, how it strained access to things like substance use help and mental health help. And those are still things that we struggle with to this day. You know, I'm really excited to have the opportunity to hear how your all's experience about COVID and how it affected you. Because as somebody who works for you all, as somebody who sees what you see in our cases, it's incredibly valuable to me to understand and to hear and to listen to all of you. The last thing I'll mention as a frame for when we get together for our small circles is I really implore you and really beseech you to talk about, if we could, your experiences. We're talking about the criminal justice system, but every justice system is different. We're talking about our community, and every community is different. You know, I mentioned before that we're one of the rare communities in the United States where crime actually went down during COVID. So I ask you, I know we watch TV, I know we have friends and relatives who live in other areas of the community who may have a different experience with their justice system than we're all having. I'll ask if it's at all possible that when we talk from firsthand experience. I know that would be most valuable to me. But of course, I'm here as a guest, and I am always happy to hear what is on your mind and react to the questions that you all have. Thank you very much for having me. I look forward to speaking with you.
So my name is Bill Casey. I'm with the Northern Virginia Mediation Service, and Dave Deal and I think I saw Thomas come in, are here to assist in facilitating a conversation. So we have several people that are primed, oriented to lead the conversations. And I'm going to, because we have less people than we have facilitators for, I'm going to start with Bruce. And if you would stand up, Bruce. Bruce is going to be in this particular circle here. And if 4 of you who aren't already a facilitator could stand and join Bruce, that would be great. So 1, 2, 3, and 1 more. If we could get 1 more person to go in the circle with Bruce. Okay, very good. All right, and then the second, Emily, if you would stand up. Emily is going to lead a circle. It'll be in outside the room. She'll follow you there. I mean, you could follow her there. If we have 4 other people that could stand and join her group. 1, 2, 3. 1 more, maybe. Thomas, how about you join that group? Yeah, go follow Emily out. And then Gail, you're the 3rd one. And you're going, if you'll follow Gail out the door, she'll take you to the table. If we could have some other people join hers, even if you were going to be a circle keeper, we probably don't need 6. So Gail, wait for just a second till we get a few more people to go with you. All right. Well, we're going to have to draw on some facilitators. Could you go with her, Gail? Yeah. And how about Arlene? Do you want to join them? Okay. Yeah, follow Gail right here behind you. And will you go, Carol? Okay, great. Okay, and then each of you may want to join. Bart, would you want to go with that group out and follow them?
Sure.
And Steve, why don't you join this group over here?
Happy to.
And Pastor Art, maybe you could go out with Emily's group.
Okay.
How's that? Okay. But let's start with Bruce, your group here. Who's reporting out? Just the highlights. Okay. To Robin. Okay. So Robin, if you want to, should she come up to that mic or does it? All right, up to this one. Or we could pass it to you, whatever you want.
No, Robin, we need you in the light.
Okay, sure. Let's see, in our group, can you hear me?
It's on.
It's on, okay,
Yeah,
there we go. In our group, we mainly had, we had Steve Descano and several longtime members of Little River Church. Do you want me to name the people in the group?
Just the highlights.
Right, okay. Let's see. So our first prompt was, of course, just name and connection to the church. I think, what were some of the, so the interests in coming tonight, a lot of people really just very curious, wanted to listen and learn. There was a lot of interest expressed in reactions to the Black Lives Matter, George Floyd murder that was going on simultaneously with COVID, and also immigration issues at the U.S. border. So for prompt number 2, biggest challenge in coping with the pandemic, many members of our group reported challenging emotional and mental health issues, finding that really the mental health services that were available to them or their loved ones were often inadequate. Not that the providers were incompetent, there just weren't enough of them. There was work-related struggles dealing with the public, who were often angry and upset at some of the decisions that members of our group had to make in their work capacities. A lot of expression of dealing with grief and loss, sense of loss, and feeling like we've missed out on 2 years of life. I'll stop there. Let's see. What was the third prompt? Oh, how have we interacted with public services? I think it's a mixed bag. We had persons in our group report that we've had very positive interactions with public services, ranging from educational services, health services, police, parks, and other recreational resources, and then others who have had less positive experiences. We had a member of our group who talked about his interaction with the state colleges. We've had actually, and universities, we had a couple members of our group report on that. And again, a kind of a mixed bag. I think I may stop here. So.
Okay, Robin, thank you very much. Emily, who was going to report out from your group? You are? Great, okay.
I told Pastor Art I am not a good public speaker, so I ask him and the other members of the group to please add any comments that I might leave out. I think most of our goals for coming tonight were to listen from others and hear the discussion. The question about challenges that we have faced in coping with the pandemic, there were several of us who commented the challenges of I think having a young family at home, the work-life balance over the last 3 years, certainly watching children either struggle with personal struggles or watching young children and the lack of in-person school that they all went through for the first year plus of the pandemic. The loss of family, the trouble of dealing with medical care for family members from afar. There is a comment about not being able to be there for friends who need your help, that the pandemic kept us from visiting or being with friends and family members in person. The challenge of wearing masks. I know many of us have adjusted to wearing masks, but the challenge of that initially and as that became part of our daily lives. And then missing family. And then we only got to one other question, which was about what public services have we interacted with on a substantial level, and if the interaction has been better or worse. We talked about one person had interactions with the court system in Arlington. I think that was actually a pretty positive experience working with the court system, commenting that we have used public transportation less in general. Praise for the vaccinations, how efficient and effective and easy to get vaccinations were. I know I went to the health department for a few of my children's vaccines, and it was just a nice exposure to the health department and a very, I think, was rolled out well. There was mention about more tension maybe within law enforcement, and also I know in some neighborhoods, the garbage service has actually been very delayed, and not sure if that's directly from the pandemic or just correlated, but I know delays in garbage pickup was mentioned. Did I leave anything out, Pastor Art? Great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Emily. And Gail, who is going to report from your group?
We had a great group discussion and actually could have gone on easily for another hour. We talked about fear, about the need to build trust, how important communication was, both communication modes we're used to and new ones, having to dress from the waist up and switching out jammy pants from the waist down. The isolation, talked about ways to have a positive influence, mentioned gender definition in particular journeys, both individual and collective. So much disruption, conflict, needing to understand impatience in others. Why is there a disconnect? How to take ownership of the situation. job loss, forced retirements. Existing in surreal environments, being off balance, disoriented, so many hard adjustments, political schisms in families, so much vitriol, protests, Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter during Black Lives Matter movement, changes in anxiety, temper, impatience, vulnerabilities, very scary for people of all ages. A plus, more outdoor activity, families taking walks, people caring for each other, getting people outside, going to national parks, becoming a caretaker, bonding with a 2-year-old every day for much time to take care of family needs. The lack of quick access to mental health services for adolescents. One member mentioned that their family member was stuck in an ER at 16 without the parents knowing for 5 days. They thought that person was transferred after 1 day. Wondering why the police showed up at the house because someone said they felt unsafe.
An increase in youth violence, empowering a need to empower young people, discussions about the school-to-prison pipeline. We all need to share with each other and invest in each other. The evolution of policing came through the slave patrols, negative images, and stereotypes projected on other groups of people. The challenges of political anger and divisiveness, not only at the national level, but in families, and the relationship between climate change and, oh, I'm sorry, could you hear me? The relationships between climate change and the emerging viruses. I did want to mention a couple other things. A need to try to see through the lens of others and what their experience is, as opposed to what your understanding or what you feel about yourself, which I thought was important. The anger, the vitriolic relationships, the mention of immigration, a person who comes from another country to get away from all the political hatred and divisiveness and whatever, and comes to the United States with the hope of this quote-unquote American dream, and they experience the same thing. So they almost want to go back home. The advances in technology that seem to get faster, and the trauma, not only for adults, but for even children, the trauma of this COVID pandemic.
Thank you. And Craig, excuse me, can you report out on the Zoom group?
So the Zoom group was a slightly different composition. It was mainly folks who are retired or can function almost entirely within their home. We did have one person who is not a little over a member, who is a part of a family with children at home, and overall, the interest in this conversation had to do as much looking forward as it did looking backward. How did we cope, but what does that mean for the future, and what are we doing moving forward? Most everyone in the group was not overwhelmingly affected. I think that's probably overstating the obvious or understating the obvious. But all of us had the opportunity to be in a safe place, whether it was a house or, Green Spring or wherever it was. But that constant stress of knowing what's safe and what's to come, the unknown, certainly weighed on everyone in that group, and that came through from multiple voices. The concern about grandchildren and education, and the concern about our Afghan friends that the church works with, who have, the number of kids who have effectively lost a year of school. One person said that their child repeated first grade because there wasn't enough learning going on in that year. A child that had to go, knock on Big Brother's door every time she wanted to get into class, because as a first grader, that was beyond her skills, and her high school brother could help. But then, of course, high school brother's not in class either. We did have a couple folks who have a grandchild or a child who thrived in the online setting, but of course, many had anxiety there. Many of the folks in the group also managed to find things that improved with COVID. Folks who found new hobbies, who found outdoor activities that they might not have undertaken without the nudge to go outside, whether that's gardening at Green Spring, or it's taking walks and meeting your friends outdoors where it's safer. Couple frustrations. One person talked about trying to tutor math over Zoom. Tutoring math may be difficult to start with, but doing it over Zoom apparently was very challenging. Folks talked about missing their families and not being able to connect. On the other hand, there are plenty of us who connected more with our families. Somebody who talked to siblings a few times a year now has and continues a weekly Sunday evening sibling Zoom call. So good things coming out of that. Choir members who found home in choir rehearsals and recording tracks, and being able to do cool things musically. In terms of interaction with services, nobody interacted with fire, police, ambulances, any of those things. But of course, we all interacted with that annual HVAC PM that has to be done, or that sliding door that breaks and needs to be repaired. One family actually, a relative of a family, contracted COVID when a plumber came to fix the dishwasher. So the risk was, and still is, quite real. My interaction perhaps is the most dramatic. With work, I was interacting with a different jurisdiction, so it was up in Maryland, so no reflection on you all. For work, I was trying to secure grants from the county to keep a theater open, well, not open, but running while it was closed, and getting to see council members interact far more on Zoom than we ever saw in real life. And I'm seeing a nodding head from a former Montgomery County employee, learning that a council member had gotten his hair cut by his spouse was entertaining. On the other hand, the day that the HVAC inspector, when our new furnace had to be inspected because it had been a year and a half of COVID and had not been inspected, the inspector was permitted to drive to the house, park in front of the house, and accept pictures that I sent him from my cell phone that I could have sent just as well to the county building, but no, he drove to the house so I could send him pictures. That's about as far as we got. Of course, lots of us interacted with medical folks, and overall that experience was well handled. We were not faced with children in the ER for days, but in terms of general medical activity, masks and hand sanitizers are all good things.
Okay, so we are coming to a close here, but before turning this back to Pastor Art and the other speakers behind me, I just wanted to thank each of you for rolling with the punches here, getting into your groups, and it sounded like they were very vibrant, animated conversations that have a lot of similarities. So I think that was the goal or one goal at least for tonight's program, and in order to bring that to closure, I'll invite Pastor Art to take back the stage.
Thank you so much. I'd like to bring Bart for final remarks and then our last closing remark from Steve. Thank you. Bart?
Yeah, just for closing remarks, this was a great opportunity to interact with you folks and, just to kind of hear some stories from the community, kind of things that you guys seen the last 2 years. Of course, we see it internal with police officers, and we're sort of, like we discussed in our group, like we see a lot of different things. And I was telling some of the folks in our group that my wife is a nurse, so she had to work on one of the COVID wings. So, this is kind of normal, to us to some degree, but like it's really refreshing to hear some stories from you folks about, just how the last couple of years have been. It's been a tough, 2 years, I think, as a society, but I think there were some blessings that came from it, like, the ability to work from home, the ability to have like this type of a virtual platform, and just, hopefully getting back to, being, civil with one another, and, just having the dignity for each person. So that's a huge, important thing, and this is a good opportunity to discuss all that. The one thing I was talking to Pastor Art about too, we were talking about a question about the police force and like just in general, if we've seen less of folks these days. And yes, we actually do have probably less officers than we had before COVID, but I think there's a few reasons for that. And one of the reasons is, with the ability to work from home and work remotely, that's a pretty lucrative type of job, especially for many people. So you really, your new officers coming out these days really, really want to do this job, because there's so many venues where you can work from home. Amazon is expanding exponentially in this area, as you guys know, and a lot of folks, a lot of the younger folks are going that way too. We've lost some of our police officers to Amazon, and they're smart for trying to grab some of our retired officers just for like safety and security and stuff like that. But it's going to be a challenge over the next couple of years to fill the ranks, but I think we're trying to fill the ranks with the right people. So thank you again for your time.
I'm really, really grateful to be here. I was really grateful for the conversations that we had. And to be quite honest, the conversations really moved me. And I'm going to say something that I didn't expect that I was going to be saying, which is, when I think about what we talked about, what everybody discussed in my group and hearing the readout from the other groups, I really came away with two things. The first one, which I didn't even realize, because I hadn't really taken the time to slow down and think back about what we all have gone through, and that is just the amount of trauma that we've all experienced. Until you lay it out the way that we laid it out today, I had no idea what I and my family had gone through, and I think that probably many of you may not have had in touch with it as much when you're laying it out and trying to remember what happened over an incredible 2-year period. The other thing, the flip side of that is the other thing that really came through was the importance of community and the resiliency of the human spirit, and how important that is, and how important that was to all of us to get through this. You've all given me a great gift. This conversation is really the first time that I think I really understood what one of my favorite Greek poets, Aeschylus, meant when he said, and you please forgive me, but when he said, even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair against our will comes wisdom through the awful grace of God. We've all learned through the awful grace of God. We have all learned something through an experience that we never want to forget or never want to go through again. So I implore all of you, and I promise that I will never forget the lessons that I've learned as we build upon community and build upon the resiliency of the human spirit to continue the work of making gentle the life of this world. Thank you very much for giving me that gift.
I want to say thank you. And Thomas Carter's with us tonight. Thank you, Thomas, for being here. Thomas was part of the Brain Trust, along with Bill and Dave, for this evening. But the seed was planted by you, Steve, some months ago when I asked him to be the preacher in the sanctuary from the pulpit. But that conversation began with, I'd like to have a conversation with the community. And so we thank you for planting that seed. And you helped to make it flourish this evening. Bart, thank you so much. The work that you do, what happens in law enforcement, we can't even begin to scrape the surface in terms of the challenges that the men and women face who are sworn to protect all of us. And so we appreciate taking the time. Bill and Dave, thank you for being partners to Little River and opening our minds and our mouths on this evening where you've invited us to share from our hearts. We thank you for that. We thank all of you on a Thursday night. We don't normally gather in this space on Thursday nights, right? But here we are, and we're grateful for that. I have to say thank you to Kathy. Y'all say thank you to Kathy, to Nicole, to Craig, to John, to David, to Kathleen, and those who have helped to make this happen technically. Special thanks to you, Cindy, for reaching out and helping us gather our conveners this evening, got on the phone, made the calls, and you are here tonight. Thank you all for that. As we leave this evening, I ask us to take the spirit of goodness with us. I ask us to go and be courageous enough to speak to someone who has not heard a human voice speaking directly to them, just one person. And I invite you to go and be authentically yourself. No pretense, no imagining yourself as someone else, but go and be authentically you and share yourself boldly, openly, and honestly. Whether you know the person or not, make someone else's day. With that, we thank you for being here tonight. Go in peace and be the Christ in this world. Thank you and good night.